The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. Kia ora tātou, this is Toby Manhire with another episode of your friendly local politics podcast, Gone by Lunchtime. What you're about to hear is part of the Gone by Lunchtime Megapod, a 12-hour epic event recorded on September 20 at Spin-off HQ. Enjoy. Kia ora tātou, this is the Spin-off Election 2023 Megapod. I'm Toby Manhire. This hour we have Victoria University Associate Professor Lara Greaves on board to talk about the Māori role, the impact of harassment, pros and cons of opinion polling. But first, with me in the studio at Spin-off HQ, James Shaw. Kia ora, James.
Kia ora.
In the last part of this Megapod, we had an Auckland Central debate, and I left the room for some of it.
Yes.
And so I'm going to do that with you
And
now.
your question was, did anybody notice?
Oh, yeah, very good. For 20 minutes, I'm going to leave the room and just leave you to... Well, you'd probably be fine. You'd probably just do the stump speech.
Just ask me a question about the emissions trading scheme and then come back 20 minutes later. It'd be
and
all
watch
good.
the numbers on the YouTube.
Die.
Talk about a sinking lid.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, that's a good climate gag. Now, the thing we're asking everybody who takes part in this adventure, 3 questions that everybody is being is obliged to ask. I stupidly forgot to ask Debbie Ngaru, so we might have to text her and find out from her. The first question is to go into win a box of chocolate fish.
Woo!
Can you please guess what the turnout will be for election 2023?
I'm going to say 89.7. No, sorry.
Sure about that?
No. I'm not sure about that. No.
79.7?
79.7.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. What's your political TV show of choice if you had to go to a desert island and you could take one of, whether it's a West Wing or a Thick of It or a Yes Minister or whatever?
Yeah, well, actually, now that you say that, probably actually Yes Minister. I think it was the original and still the goodie. I mean, I loved The West Wing, but I went back...
Did you believe it when you watched it?
At the time,
yeah.
Sure, but
was it inspirational to you? I mean, seriously,
yes,
was it? Yeah.
Absolutely,
yeah. Right.
Yeah. But the problem is it's aged badly, right?
Yes.
So because it really was a show for that time, and because I went back and I tried to watch it again recently. And I was like, I can't watch this. Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah. Well, it was. It just represented like the whole mood of the world was different.
Absolutely, I agree. We could talk about that for half an hour, but we won't. Let's instead talk about Mojo, which has been one of the motifs of the campaign.
Yeah.
You might have heard Christopher Luxon, the next Prime Minister, talk about how New Zealand has lost its mojo.
Mm-hmm.
And needs to get it back. I'm interested to know from you, as we've been asking others in this scientific survey, where your personal mojo level is this minute. 0 being all gone, absolutely expired, no mojo, don't know where it is. 10 being it's just flowing everywhere. You can barely breathe. You're so surrounded in mojo.
Mine goes all the way up to 11.
Oh, is that really what you want to say? Your mojo is 11.
Well, I thought that you'd get the movie reference.
The Spinal Tap reference I got.
Exactly.
Yeah,
okay, good. But you weren't giving me anything there.
No. But do you want to say 11?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
look, I mean,
11.
I'm actually no. Look, people keep it's sort of an odd thing.
I just want you to be honest.
Yeah,
I just want you to be honest.
I'm feeling really good about it, Toby.
Okay.
Our campaign is in better shape than any. I've done 6 election campaigns now. I'm less worried, more relaxed, happier with our performance than I've been at any previous election campaign. I think we're on a roll, frankly, and I think that we're going to probably end up with more Green MPs than we have ever had before. I think that we'll end up with
how many?
2 or 15.
So what's that? Is that like 11%? 11.5%?
Yeah, 11 to 12. It's sort of it's one of those things. It depends a lot on what's going on with the wasted vote and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But somewhere between 11 and 12.
Yeah.
And I reckon we're going to win 2 or 3 electorate seats. And so having more Green MPs and more than one electorate seat would be absolutely an historical election for us. And so I'm feeling really good about it. Yeah.
How different would it be whether that intake is in a governing arrangement or an opposition? I mean, you can treat this as an abstract question if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, a big caucus is a good thing for any party,
yes,
obviously.
Yeah.
What difference does it make? I mean, arguably, it's harder to induct a new group of people when you're in a governing arrangement.
Yes, it is, and we've had that situation in the last couple of terms as well. So I've got some experience in what that looks like, but we're going to have quite a big intake this time. I mean, it could be half our caucus pretty much would be new MPs. Look, the big difference is the more MPs we have, then the more ministers we will have, because the number of ministers that you get is proportional to the number of MPs you get. And so that is what...
You don't get any if you're in opposition, have I got that right?
You don't get any ministers. No, that's right. And I think you probably know that one. Yeah, and...
I've got Andrew Geddes on later, so I might check with him. Just in case.
I'm sure he'll have a view. He'll be like, well, on the one hand. Yeah. But no, so that is the big difference. It is really important, I think, to ensure that you've got someone who's got some experience who is able to support those new MPs and to kind of help them get their feet under the table and make the massive life adjustment from being, kind of civilian to being a member of parliament. But ultimately, that's just kind of part of what happens, right? As you bring new MPs in, if you get into government, you get ministers. Great.
Did you watch the debate last night?
No.
Why not?
I was at another event.
You're not interested?
Well, look, I sort of had a feeling of how it was going to go, and I also I did read some of the post-match analysis this morning, and it went pretty much how I thought it was going to go. Yeah. And I was at this other event, and that was a better use of my time, frankly.
I've got a page up here that I just there's an article on the excellent website newsroom.co.nz, and it's a picture of an infrastructure debate.
Oh, yep.
And it looks like it could be. You see that there?
Oh, yeah.
You see that there?
Yeah, 5 bros. 5 bros in suits.
You see that there? This is high-tech stuff here. That looks like one of the circles of hell. Was it terrible? Was it as bad as it looks like in that photo?
No, it actually wasn't. And that, I mean, in part, that's due to Tove O'Brien's excellent moderation. One of the things that's quite fascinating about the debate around infrastructure is it's one category of all of the issues that we all have to worry about during an election campaign.
Yeah.
It is really important, critically important, because basically everything else depends on it, where there's actually quite a lot of similarity between what the different parties think about it. And of course, during election campaigns are designed to highlight differences. And so in some of those debates, I think the incentive for politicians is to kind of overemphasize, well, we're going to do it better or differently, blah, blah, blah. And actually you just find out that the current team are kind of doing what the next team were planning to do, and and then everyone's pretending that there's this great divide, and actually there isn't. Like, we all know we need tons more infrastructure. We all know that's going to be expensive. We all know we need to finance it differently. So in that sense, it was actually one of the more civilized debates that I've been a part of.
Nice. We talked about West Wing before, and that being an interesting, important formative experience for you. What did you have on climate change? Did you have an epiphany going way back into was there a moment where it kind of clicked for you, or when you thought, this is the thing that I kind of want to devote most of my adult life to. Was there?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't sort of like epiphany type thing, but I was doing a master's degree in the UK, and I'd been doing some work.
Now there's a bit of dispute about your.
Oh, you need to stay off your Telegram account there.
Your credentials on the LinkedIn there.
We'll come to that. But I was doing this degree.
Yeah.
And I had been doing work with businesses around climate change, but I'd never kind of fully engaged with it. And it was kind of during the course of that we had, guest lectures who are some of the kind of top climate scientists and policy people and economists in the world. And the thing that kind of grabbed me about it was the kind of realization that climate change is the ultimate threat multiplier, right? So you want to save the whales, great, you can do that. But if we don't fix climate change, the whales are gone anyway, and no matter what you care about in life, if you're a social justice person or you're someone who, is kind of more about we need a rock solid economy or, whatever, all of that is at risk with the climate crisis. And so to me, it just kind of became the obvious thing of like, well, if I want to make a contribution with my life, the thing that I need to focus on is climate change.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spin-Off. You can help us keep all of The Spin-Off's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
One of the challenges in journalism and in politics is making people interested in climate change. It's complicated. Mm-hmm. Parts of it are. It's depressing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? How do you approach that problem in terms of trying to?
Yeah, I think so in fact, I gave a speech yesterday to the Climate Change and Business Conference in Auckland, and that was actually literally the job was to kind of engage people in a way that's like acknowledges the reality. Very, very, very bad.
That was your task with the speech to achieve that or to discuss that issue?
No, my speech was to inspire hope.
Okay.
In the face of all these consequences that we're dealing with. And so I think the way to do it is to kind of relate it to people's actual lived experience, right? So you can talk about economic instruments and hockey stick graphs and melting ice, but nobody relates to any of that. It doesn't impact them. But what does impact them is when every time it rains in Auckland these days, people kind of like spike with adrenaline and think, shit, do I need to run home and like rescue my grandpa who's in a wheelchair and get him up to the top floor, because that's what people had to deal with. And so there's this phrase now called rain trauma, here after those anniversary day floods and after Cyclone Gabrielle. And so I think if you kind of start there and you kind of anchor people in their actual lived experience, which actually, frankly, is mostly a negative one. But then where I go with it is, because I obviously read all the bad news, right? But one of the great privileges of my job as climate change minister is I also get to see all the good news that most people don't get to see, right? So I get to see what's going on with the adoption rate of electric vehicles in this country, which is going gangbusters. I get to see that our coal imports are the lowest that they've been in at least a decade. I get to see all the kind of amazing innovations that are kind of coming on stream as different kind of entrepreneurs and engineers and so on kind of try and work out different fixes for different parts of the problem. I get to see all the community groups that are doing really cool work, in their communities, helping to ensure that people are safe and well when the floods come, all of that kind of stuff. And that gives me hope, right? And so I kind of feel like a big part of my job is to kind of go, yeah, I know that your lived experience of this is grim. I know that every time you turn on the telly or open one of your news apps, it's just full of horrendous news from around the world. But things are changing. And I know, we've taken a really long time to get started, and it's a huge amount of effort to kind of get that flywheel turning. But it is starting to turn. We are building up momentum. and you should have hope in that, right? And it's not that kind of groundless hope, which is like, oh, it'll all work out one day, like that sort of faith, but hope that's grounded in action and seeing change happen. And I think when people, the EV thing, that was an action that some people could take that they knew would make a difference, and they took it, right? And so that is like, great, I can be a part of this. If someone's, working in an office building and they kind of talk to the manager about, can we stick solar panels on the roofs? And, that's kind of, it's that thing about lots of people doing lots of little things that together collectively add up to making a difference. And that's what gives people hope, is the sense of like, actually, I know we've been talking about this for 3 decades, but as I go around, I can see things are changing, physically changing in ways that are good, and that point towards the future.
I mean, the other side of that coin is that people are most engaged when terrible things are happening, right? There's that, and then there's the whole adaptation part of the puzzle too. But for example, the weather attribution organisation is one main group run out of is it King's College or maybe anyway in London, but there's a bunch of people around the world, and they're committed now to working as fast as they can with a group of scientists to ascertain the extent to which, or the likely extent to which, climate change has contributed to a weather event. And it's interesting because sometimes you have to be, the responsible thing to do is to say sometimes maybe not so much, even if it's terrible, because terrible weather has always happened. And, and the worst thing is when people overplay that, I think, particularly. But it is, I mean, that's not so much the hope part of the equation, but it is the kind of here's the reality part of the equation. And I think, I sort of wonder whether, like one of the things I've wondered about is whether there needs to be, someone needs to come up with like a Richter scale. For climate impact. Yeah. So you can say, that
was a 4.
That flood, was a 4 on the attribution scale or whatever. So you sort of start to have these points of access for people in an area that is otherwise feels so technical, complicated, inaccessible,
It's a great idea. I'll talk to some of, because we've got people here in New Zealand who do that for weather events here in New Zealand, right? So they will say, I'm trying to remember the exact example, but there was something that occurred in the last year or so, and it wasn't the cyclone.
There was a report into the Nelson.
Maybe
Nelson
it was
floods
that.
A while ago.
And they said, that was about 20% worse as a result of climate change.
They do.
Right?
They do. How much worse and how much more likely was it to happen?
That's right. That's right. Frequency and severity. So we're actually getting quite sophisticated with that. That kind of work now, and that is useful because, of course, half the debate is you've got these old codgers who are like, we've always had storms, and that's true. We have, and some of them have been really bad and they've killed people. But the issue now is that yes, they are occurring more frequently and they are more severe than they have ever been, and so that but to me that's not about because I think you're right in that sense of this can be very, very depressing, and when people just go on switch off and hide under their duvet, right, and kind of like wake me up when the crisis is over. And actually we need people to engage, and that's why we need to tell the truth about what's happening, but not in a way that's, overly frightening, or we don't need to amplify that because actually it's that story tells itself.
The apocalypse is playing out without your help.
Exactly, that's right. You don't need to kind of do that. But it is really important that we give people hope, and that's why a lot of the time, I talk about actually in New Zealand, our emissions have come down in 2020, 2021, 2022, and the December quarter last year, we think, at the moment, it's initial data, but we think was probably the lowest it's been this century.
Right.
And that, when people hear that, they're like, oh my God, we've never heard that before because every other year it's gone up, right? And so I'm like, all that effort, it's working. Things are changing.
Another thing that's gone down, and the numbers out this morning, is the Ipsos Issues Monitor. I don't know if you've caught up with that. They do it every sort of, I think, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I haven't kind of looked at it in detail, but there was a lot of blue on the page that I saw.
There's a lot of blue, and that what you mean by that is that they give you the sort of 10 subjects that are ranked as most important by people, and then which party is considered best equipped to deal with it, basically. And it's an interesting. It's like a board in an airport, and you see it, and it's quite a powerful indicative device to see how things are going. Yeah. One of the things in this result is that climate change, which had got up into the top 5, which is quite unusual for example, in the Australian version they do, but it's now fallen out again. Yeah. And this is a story we've heard throughout the election. It's a cost of living election. It's all about the economy. I mean, does that make it harder for you? I mean, that's what that people. You're quite upbeat. Your mojo is off the chart. Yeah. But people are talking about cost of living. It's a very deal with the stuff that's right in front of me right now. It's too important.
I think that there's two things. One of which is I think that the National Party have been very disciplined about their messaging and just making sure that the campaign is framed entirely on their terms, right? So I think that they've been very strong on that. That's as it always is in election campaigns. But I think the really critical thing is actually people are feeling it right now. People are experiencing higher rents, higher mortgage rates, cheese at $16 a kilo. That's very, very real for people. And they don't care why that is, and there are good reasons for why that is, but so what? That is my day-to-day experience. And I just think we need to kind of recognise the reality of that. That's actually, if you look at the Green Party campaign, we've put out 7 big policy initiatives. Only one of them, which is the one around oceans, was not a cost of living related policy. Everything else was about lifting incomes or reducing household costs in ways that also happen to reduce pollution, make our towns and buildings more resilient to the storms and floods and so on and so forth. So we were trying to, in this one, we kind of said, well, actually we've got to be where people are, and we do need to deal with the long-term challenges that we're facing, like climate change. But we need to offer something at this election, which is, here is a solution to climate change that can make your life a lot better right now. And I think we've kind of made the right call there because people are clearly responding to it.
Do you, in terms of, you put out your numbers quite early, a sort of your fiscal plan, and Greens. Do you have to recalculate those based on preview? Are you going to?
No.
Why not?
No, because there was very little in our numbers that came out of future allowances, and of course, preview is the one. If like National, for example, if you were calculating on the base, if you're calculating your fiscals on the basis of future allowances, preview put quite a big hole in those future allowances, so it affects that. What we were looking at was the idea of increasing revenue through our wealth tax, right? And then what that does is it enables you to pay for the income-free tax threshold of $10,000.
Doesn't that all include? Doesn't it bake into it forecasts about revenue?
It does. But yes, of course it does. It's kind of literally the point of it.
That shift with the preview, right?
Yeah, yes, they do. But the point that we're making, and this is my problem with the National Party's numbers, is that they're kind of based on assumptions that are kind of wildly incorrect. We were basing our assumptions on an additional revenue stream from asset values, which are currently untaxed, unlike anywhere else in the OECD, and to say, well, we will actually bring in the additional revenue in that way in order to fund the not everything, but the kind of the main chunks of what it is that we're sort of putting out at this election. And there are some things that actually aren't about money, right? So, the ocean package that we put out was largely a kind of regulatory tool, right? It's about, ensuring that we've got the adequate protections in place across a third of the ocean by 2030, blah, blah, blah. So that stuff doesn't actually cost a great deal of additional revenue.
Thank you, James Shaw, for coming in. I know you have to go. I think you're off to Onehunga.
I am. Yes, we're off to look at a house, which is one of the people who is kind of doing what it is that we want to do with our clean power payment. So, before I was just saying, here's a solution to climate change that also helps to make your life better right now.
Solar panels, but more insulation.
That's
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Well, look, enjoy that. Thank you for coming in. Good luck with the rest of the campaign.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Spin-off Election 2023 Megapod, back with Lara Grieve soon. Thanks for listening. There's plenty more where this came from on your Gone By Lunchtime feed. Thanks to Jane, Te Aihe and Samuel, and the rest of the team at the Spin-Off for making the Megapod happen.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at the Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.